So as the tariff war now threatens to explode, I'm joined by a very special guest. Joining me from New York is one of the world's leading economists and public policy analysts, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, joins me from New York. Appreciate your joining us, Professor Sachs. You've been a clear critic of Donald Trump's tariff policies. You've described them in the past as stupid, bizarre, economically reckless, and self-destructive of U.S. foreign policy interests. Despite that, as we've seen, the Trump administration has decided to go ahead with 50% tariffs on Indian goods, including a 25% tariff tied to India's Russian oil purchases. Do you believe that Donald Trump has simply lost it, or is he arm twisting India?
Well, he's trying to arm twist India, but he's not going to succeed. What he is succeeding in doing is uniting the BRICS countries, bringing India closer to Russia, to China, to Brazil, to other major economies in the world. He is isolating the United States from the world economy because, after all, these tariffs are making the U.S. industry less competitive. Maybe they'll produce more for the home market, but they'll be less competitive internationally. And what countries like India and China and Russia will find out is that the fast-growing majority of the world economy is not the United States or even Europe. It is the emerging economies around the world. So I think Trump is shooting, I won't say himself in the foot, he's shooting America in the foot, my country. He's making it less prosperous and less competitive. But he is effectively uniting the rest of the world in closer relations.
I'll come to the manner in which he's uniting the rest of the world in a moment. But the fact is, despite all the criticism of his tariff policies, he's unrelenting. In fact, his trade advisor, Mr. Navarro, says India is the Maharaja of tariffs, accuses India of profiteering from cheap Russian oil purchases. So Trump isn't backing down. That has perplexed a few people who thought that he would pull back as he had with China. With India, he seems to be going all the way.
I don't think Trump understands very much about what he does, and I don't think that the advisors understand much about India. Clearly, Mr. Navarro does not. And they thought that they could bully India, which is absurd. For the United States to think that it could bully a great power with 1.5 billion people, I could have told them no. But as I told many friends in India, don't trust the United States either. The U.S. Is not after a special relationship with India. The United States is short-sighted, poorly led, unstable, and not the basis for India's long-term development.
Mm-hmm. So what, therefore, do you believe are India's realistic options from your vantage perspective? As you said, India is being drawn closer to BRICS, to Brazil. The Prime Minister has spoken to Lula. He's likely to meet the Chinese president and the Russian president at the SCO next week. Are you saying that India must simply hold out, press the pause button, allow this to pass, and eventually Trump will see the light?
I think that India should make the obvious point that after the Alaska meeting of Trump and Putin, the case for so-called penalty sanctions is openly absurd. So maybe Trump doesn't even understand the inconsistency. The Americans have said we want to move to a real solution to the war in Ukraine. We won't put extra sanctions on Russia right now. So why in the world is the United States attacking India? So I think the Indian negotiators should say to the United States, you should immediately remove this 25% penalty tariff. This is absurd and contrary to what is actually happening in the diplomacy regarding the war in Ukraine. That's one point. Second, more generally, India, I think in some minds thought that it would replace China in the U.S. supply chains. This is not going to happen. The U.S. is protectionist. It is unstable. India is not going to slip in and smoothly grow the exports to $500 billion or whatever was thought, because the United States mentality is not in favor of India against China. It's protectionist. So this is just simply a sad fact of life. It makes the U.S. less competitive, less prosperous, and so forth, but it is not something that India alone is going to change. So India needs to cultivate markets in the rest of the world. My own long-standing advice, by the way, which is sometimes in India raises eyebrows, is for India and China to settle the outstanding issues. I want the border disputes to be settled. I want China to support India as the sixth permanent member of the UN Security Council, because I think the world really would benefit from that. And I want India and China to trade more and invest more mutually with each other. I believe that India would do well to join RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership that now includes the ASEAN 10, China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. I'd love for India to join that, because I think the combination of South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia would be the world powerhouse for the economy for the next quarter century plus. So that seems to me to be something quite desirable as well. I've long believed that India has so many things to offer Africa's development, and I believe that Africa, from a very low base, will be a fast-growing region of another 1.5 billion people, by the way, in the coming years. So I think diversification is a core part of the strategy. The BRICS is a very core part of that. India will have the presidency of the BRICS in 2026, and that's a very good thing.
So what you're saying is contentious. There will be many listening to you, Professor Sachs, who will say, here is America's top economist saying this is an opportunity for India to move closer to China, to increase its trade with China at a time when there has been mistrust between the two countries, where India has effectively accused China of backing Pakistan in attacks on India during Operation Sindoor. You're saying leave all that aside and use this opportunity to reach out and build a stronger trade relationship with China. Almost forget about the United States, with which we have nearly $85 billion annually being exported.
Well, I'm not saying to forget the security issues. I'm saying to solve them, because India and China together constitute nearly 40% of the world population. Two great countries, two great civilizations, two dynamic economies, and two countries that have a shared interest in a multipolar world, not in a U.S.-dominated world, or not in a world in which the U.S. changes the rules every day and attempts to boss around other countries. So my view is that India and China have not just the competition, which people understand, but a very, very powerful mutual interest as well. And that's what I would like to be developed more deeply, because I love both countries and would like to see them work together to build the kind of multilateralism that we need in the world today.
But that's in the long term, or medium to long term. What about in the short term? The short term impact already is that our exports in particular sectors, textiles, gems and jewelry, footwear, shrimps, are all being affected. There's a sense of uncertainty, unease by this constant disruption that Donald Trump has caused. How do we deal in the short term with a US president who seemingly is insistent that India stop purchasing oil from Russia if they expect the tariffs to be brought down?
I would quickly move with a lot of the Indian corporates to open trade relations in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in West Asia, with Russia. I would move quickly to improve the payments mechanisms, for example, for trade with Russia, which have been impeded by U.S. illegal unilateral sanctions. So I would not depend on begging the U.S. for mercy. I would not. I don't think you'll get a stable relationship out of that. Of course, I'm not against negotiations. I don't want to be misunderstood. But India absolutely has interests and abilities to diversify its trade all over the world and should use this opportunity to do so and use the presidency of the BRICS to do so.
But, but what would happen then, Professor Sachs, to the real possibility that of the ongoing trade negotiations, which have been put on pause button? Does India now say, unless the United States gives us certain specific assurances, we're not going ahead with these trade negotiations? Or does India continue a parallel track of trade negotiations with the United States while also diversifying its trade basket?
I would say the latter, but I would say that the trade position should be to explain to the United States that, especially given the realities of the U.S.-Russia discussions, that so-called penalty tariff must be put aside, period. It's absurd to be punishing India for something that the United States itself isn't doing. So this is an obvious point. It's just completely out of the timing. The 25% was imposed in the lead up to Alaska when Trump had put an ultimatum on Russia to a ceasefire without condition by August 8th. And it said, we will put secondary sanctions or penalty tariffs on anyone that doesn't abide by that. But then the U.S. itself dropped that position in the direct diplomacy between the U.S. and Russia. And yet the penalty tariff remains. So it's an absurdity.
Right.
By the way, Peter Navarro has to be the worst graduate of my former economics department that I know of. The guy makes no sense at all. Don't believe that he determines anything. But the negotiators, you have very sophisticated negotiators, explain to the American side, maybe patiently, hard as it is, that 25% tariff, stop. It's absurd. It's completely out of date. That's the first point. The second point is, for sure, negotiate. I don't believe in ultimatums, period, in the world scene. But diversify. Don't just hold the U.S. as the key, whether it's to security or military equipment or financing or trade. It's not the key at all.
You know, it's interesting you're saying it's absurd what the United States is doing, particularly because China is the one which is the maximum importer of oil at the moment from Russia. Nothing's been done to China. No penalties have been imposed on China, which is just another example of US double standards. Therefore, Professor Sachs, in conclusion, therefore, how going forward should we look at Donald Trump himself? Here is someone whom the Prime Minister of India tried to build a strong relationship. Here are two countries who over the last 25 years have invested a lot in this relationship. How should now India treat Donald Trump? Is there a rational way in which one can any more engage? Because there seems to be a complete trust deficit now.
Yeah, Donald Trump is not based on trust, not based on consistency, not based on single standards, but on double standards. Nothing will stick anyway. I'm alarmed as an American citizen. I live in this country. By the way, this is not just trade policy. This is budget policy. This is every policy in the United States right now. Very unstable, attacking the universities, I can add, and many other things. So this is a very bad period of poor governance in the United States. It's likely to last a decade. It's not only Trump, although Trump brings it to the forefront. India is a great power and a rising power, the world's most populous country. It needs a global vision, not one dependent on a particular country, certainly. And not to give up on anything, but diversify and have good relations with these other major powers.
But you see, the interesting thing is Donald Trump himself doesn't see this to be an area of darkness. He actually believes that tariffs are ending wars. He said that again today, that I threatened India with tariffs, and that's what forced India and Pakistan to come to a ceasefire. He's claiming that it's had no impact on the US economy, that inflation is under control, the markets are doing very well. So he doesn't seem, is he living in some alternate parallel universe then?
Obviously, he's not very smart, not very knowledgeable. No one has ever accused him of book learning. No one has ever accused him of understanding these issues, and he doesn't. And so not to take too seriously the things that he says. Unfortunately, I mean, the U.S. is a major country. We should be able to take seriously the words. But what country like the U.S. ever governed purely by executive decrees and Truth Social postings? This is unbelievably bad governance, unserious and unstable. And that is a reality that we face right now.
Professor Jeffrey Sachs, very strong words that you're using. I hope there's someone out in Washington listening to you and getting a bit of a wake-up call from what one of the world's leading economists is saying to us. Thank you so much, Professor Sachs, for joining me here tonight on the News Today. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you. I appreciate it.